Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and I'm having to do this live, and I've got to be honest with you, I'm not real sure that I'm doing everything correctly. YouTube changed up the way you get into the live. They changed up a lot of the settings, and I'm kind of a techno dummy. So I'm just simply hoping that it is live. If somebody can, post something on the chat here and say, "Yeah, you're live," I would appreciate that very, very much. Well, this is video number 45 in our discussion of the Olivet Discourse, and I was going to begin this morning with a discussion of the messianic woes, the messianic birth pains that are found in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 8. However, a day or so ago on Facebook, there was an absolutely fascinating, revealing, and all the while disturbing exchange between myself and former preterist Sam Frost and another person or two. Now, Mr. Frost has made an incredible number of changes in his theology, sense, and eschatology on any given number of verses. He has literally taken and created some new, novel, unprecedented views on passages of the New Testament. For instance, on 2 Thessalonians chapters 1 and 2. It's stunning. And when I began reviewing and responding to his book, The Parousia of the Son of Man, I'm going to be sharing with you some of those absolutely astounding, brand spanking, newly invented doctrines that Mr. Sam Frost is now expounding. But in the Facebook exchange, we were discussing Matthew chapter 24 and the disciples' questions. And I made the comment the disciples were asking about the end of the age represented by the Jerusalem temple. And Mr. Frost made the rather astounding claim that the Jerusalem temple did not represent any age, period. Now, in the first place, without a doubt, this has to be one of the most amazing claims that a person could ever make. Here we have the Jerusalem temple, which was the very symbol of the law of Moses. It was the very symbol of the Mosaic age. It's interesting that Kenneth Gentry is seemingly promoting Sam Frost right now, and recently published a couple of articles by Sam. And I can guarantee you that Mr. Kenneth Gentry believes that the Jerusalem temple represented the Old Covenant Mosaic age. He's on record as teaching that. Well, now here's Sam Frost saying, "Oh no, that temple didn't represent any age." Then, amazingly, after I posed several questions in regard to the temple, what age it would represent, pointing out that it represented Moses and the law, Mr. Sam Frost did a 180 pivot. And he said, well, yes, it's entirely possible that when Jesus predicted the destruction of the temple, the disciples going, "Oh my goodness, that's going to be the end of the age." Oh, but wait. You see, number one, that's a direct contradiction with what he had said earlier in the Facebook discussion. On the one hand, the Jerusalem temple did not represent any age, period. Then, when he was entrapped on that, he said, well, yes, absolutely. When Jesus predicted the fall of Jerusalem and the temple, yes, it's absolutely correct that the disciples did think of the end of the age. Oh, but wait, you see, the caveat here is that Mr. Frost believes that the disciples thought about the end of the current age. That is, the Christian age. Well, as I've already discussed with you in previous discussions of Matthew chapter 24, and as I just pointed out, folks, listen, that Jerusalem temple did not represent the Christian age. It did not represent the New Covenant age. So when Mr. Frost, first of all, initially denies that the Jerusalem temple represented any age, and then, when entrapped on that, does a 180 pivot and says, well, yes, of course, the disciples began to believe or began to think of the end of the age. Oh, that's the end of the Christian age? I'm sorry, this is a 180-degree self-contradiction, and it just shows you the utter desperation, the self-inherent self-contradictions in Mr. Frost's current eschatology. Then, increasingly amazingly, when Jesus said, do not be deceived, you're going to hear of wars, rumors, and wars. Do not be deceived. So Mr. Frost says, well, you see, what that means is they're going to see the fall of Jerusalem. Now remember, the fall of Jerusalem ostensibly would be the end of the Christian age in the mind of the disciples. Now, I had asked Mr. Frost if the disciples were confused or wrong to link the Jerusalem temple to the end of the age. And remember, he initially said didn't represent any age. But now it represents the end of the Christian age. Contradiction. But now watch this. You got to catch the power of this. Then, while the temple represented, or the fall of Jerusalem would represent the end of the Christian age, Mr. Frost says, when you see or hear of wars and rumors of wars, Mr. Frost says, that was the destruction of the temple. Wait, what? The destruction of the temple supposedly represented, rightly so, the end of the age, the end of the Christian age, according to Mr. Frost. But then he does another 180-degree pivot and says, well, the wars and the rumors of wars is actually the destruction of Jerusalem itself and the temple. Wait a minute, that can't be true. Because if the destruction of Jerusalem is the wars and rumors of wars of Matthew chapter 24, 6 and 7, then that means that it's the end of the age because the disciple linked the destruction of Jerusalem with the end of the age. You see the problems here? I mean, Mr. Frost is contradicting himself, coming and going up, down, sideways. His comments are both confused and confusing. There is simply there's just simply no way to make sense of this. So Mr. Frost then attempted to say, well, you will hear of wars, rumors, and wars. That's AD 70, but the end is not yet. No, if the disciples were correct to link the fall of Jerusalem with the end of the current age, then that was the end. So it's specious to say, and to appeal to Jesus' words, the end is not yet. Because if you admit, as Mr. Frost did, that the disciples correctly linked the fall of Jerusalem and the temple with the end of the age, and again, when I asked him if they were confused or wrong, he said no. So, once again, if the temple is linked with the end of the age, i.e. the end of the Christian age, and if the wars and rumors of wars was in AD 70, the destruction of the Jewish temple, then guess what? Then the end of the Christian age was in AD 70, and we're looking for a different end of the age, because Jesus said the end, i.e. the end of the Christian age, or the end of whatever age, is not yet. So, Mr. Frost posits the wars and rumors of wars as AD 70. But, remember, the disciples linked the end of the age the end of the current age with the fall of Jerusalem, and they were not confused, and they were not wrong. But that's a self-destructive admission. And so what we find in Mr. Frost's comments, to summarize, first of all, he denied that the Jewish temple represented any age whatsoever. Then he said the Jerusalem temple and its destruction did represent, in the mind of the apostles, the end of the age. Then he admitted they were not wrong, they were not confused. Well, folks, if the disciples were not wrong, and if the disciples were not confused, to tie the end of the age with the fall of Jerusalem, then when Mr. Frost says the wars and rumors of wars was AD 70, the destruction of the temple, then by his own self-contradictory comments, the end of the age was in fact in AD 70, and since he says, well, the end is not yet, that necessitates the end of another age. But wait a minute. That's not what the disciples were asking about. And remember, they were not wrong and they were not confused. The only one confused here, the only one that's wrong, is Mr. Sam Frost, as he desperately tries to throw something, anything, against the wall and hope that something sticks. But this kind of self-contradictory, more importantly, biblically self-contradictory argumentation is so illogical, inherently self-contradictory as to be literally unbelievable. Hey, thanks for the comments here on the side, folks, about some other issues there. Thank you, Joanne Mercer, for your comments. Let me see here. The gospel of the kingdom, the good news of the kingdom would be preached to all nations, then the end would come. What end was that? That was the gospel was preached in all the world in that generation. Romans chapter 10, Colossians 1:5-7, Colossians 1:23. And in my book, Into All the World, Then Comes the End, I document that very, very fully. And thank you again for your questions. And let me see here. Okay, well, Joanne Mercer, thank you again for your questions. I don't have time today. I'm already almost at 13 minutes. But I appreciate that so very much. And I answer all of these questions, by the way, in that book that I just mentioned, Into All the World, Then Comes the End. Okay. Hey, listen, folks, thanks for joining me for this morning's morning musings. I really hope, and obviously it did come through, so I appreciate those of you who have joined me here at this early time of the morning. I've got to see if I can get my Macintosh working. I tried again to turn it on just immediately before I came on live air here. It still would not power up, so I don't know if it's cratered on me or what, but that's the way it is. So I may be back here live with you in the morning. In the meantime, thanks again for joining me here on Morning Musings. I appreciate it so very much. I'll see you on the flip side.